What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a really cool custom knife overview to do with you guys. This is a Gavko Spinner 3.0 by Michael Gavko. This is a full custom knife, and you guys know how I do custom knives on this channel. They're just overviews. I don't do reviews. I'm not going to critique a custom maker's work because there's there's a lot that goes into that, and not 100% of the work is geared towards utility. While it definitely, there's premium materials involved, utility and how the blade performs is a factor, but also there's, the exotic nature of the materials, how sought after they are, and, the groups of people who are actually interested in purchasing custom knives, they're much smaller than the vastness of the knife community just looking for a high quality tool, so for that reason, this is more of a look how interesting this is type of video. This knife was sent to me, like many others, from my good friend Spirited Whiskey. So give him a follow on Instagram. It's absolutely due to people like that I can continuously bring you guys tons of content. Also, make sure to check out the description in my video for my Redbubble store if you want to check out merch, my Patreon if you'd like to support the channel, my sister channel, Silent Complex, if you don't want to hear my voice, and a ton of very recommendable knives from famous, production companies, and budget knives, and EDC gear, and a ton of stuff. So whatever your itch is, feel free to scratch it with my description. Let's go ahead and get a measurement on this guy. Overall length from tip to scale, you're looking at 7.75 inches, it looks like. The blade length is exactly 3.5 inches, and your cutting edge is exactly 3 inches. This knife is one of those that has the appearance of a larger knife at first glance, and then you find out it's under 8 inches. That actually was kind of surprising to me. Let's do some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. Rat 1's coming in at 8.6 inches overall. How about up against the Spyderco PM2? Spyderco PM2 is coming in at 8.3 inches overall, so you can see there, still a little bit smaller there. How about up against the Benchmade Reptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue coming in at 8 inches overall, so still a little bit bigger. And last but not least, the Spyderco Para 3. Para 3 coming in at 7.25, so just about a ½ inch less. Given the area up here, the forward choil, this knife, I would call this roughly a medium-sized knife. Not quite large, definitely not big, but definitely not small. It's kind of right there in the middle. It's going to be a sweet spot for a lot of people. So how's the action on this guy? Well, it is running on bearings, and it is a custom knife, which means it's going to be incredibly smooth. This is extremely indicative of a very, very finished, very polished. It's like, I can take a look at this up close and know that not only is this finished, but it's like it could have be lacking a ton of polishes and still be very finished. It's obvious that the person who made this took extra care to make sure that every last little thing was in working order, including, disengagement of the lock bar, the positioning of everything, of course, but internally, it would not surprise me at all if there was some extra polishing in there. This is a very new knife, one that was made in like November of 2019, and it's a full custom, and Mr. Whiskey clearly has not been using it, which means it probably still has some breaking in to do. Despite that being the case, it is very smooth, very glassy, no friction or anything like that. Very, very pleasant. Let me go ahead and get a measurement of spine thickness here before we weigh it. Get that zeroed out. I'm going to guess something like 155 thousandths or so. Sorry, let's make sure that we're exactly zero. Open this up and coming down. Okay, 155 to 160 thousandths. That's about what I expected. Not an enormous knife, but we do have solid Timascus. Yes, these are Timascus scales. We're going to talk about that. Still, though, not an enormous amount of material, right? Taking a look at the inside, you can see that there is no milling. But let's go ahead and weigh it here real quick. I'm thinking this thing is getting to the point where it actually is almost out of batteries because it's starting to act funny. But anyways, overall weight, yeah, nothing crazy. 4 ounces, a little over 4 ounces. No big deal at all. Considering we don't have any sort of crazy, we don't have a crazy shape. We definitely have an interesting looking knife here, both in terms of, you know, just the general aesthetics and the lines, right? But when it's folded up, your carry profile, both in terms of thickness and shape, is really not that crazy. Let me take a look at this knife up against. It kind of, there's a couple similarities here, but up against the Spyderco Para 3, you can see there, it's exactly the same thickness. Let's go ahead and lay it down and look at this in terms of height. You can see there, really at its peak height, it's shorter than both the PM2 and Para 3. And it also has this sort of banana shape. So coming in and out of the pocket, or where it hangs in the pocket, is very pleasant. It does sort of curve up against the back of your pocket, but no issue there whatsoever. Carry profile is great. No issue whatsoever. So here's let me give you guys some information. I did have to take some notes here. On a custom knife, I do like to make sure that I get everything right. Like I said, this was built November of 2019, somewhere around there, by Michael Gavko in his shop in Florida. So he does make these in-house in the United States. This is a full custom knife, meaning handmade. Each one of these apparently is unique, despite, you know, even if it's by the same model. There's a lot of, you guys have probably heard of Gavko. You know, they've done some collaborations, they've done some drops. I think I actually had a Gavko drop. I think it was a Mako. I can't remember, early on this channel. But when he does custom knives of the same model, so if you go and you find another Spinner 3.0 out there, it will not be the same. They are all unique, every single one of them, for his custom knives. Production knives, you probably find a bunch of copies, but for his custom knives, they're all unique. This material here, I was not sure. I had no idea what this was. It looks like a marble countertop, doesn't it? This is actually called Snow Black Timascus. Very sought after, by the way. Very, very sought after for people looking for this knife. But they achieve this with a very deep acid etch. Very interesting. When I think of Timascus, I think of the rainbow colored, but it's you know, it's layered titanium. Now, the exact process, I don't know. I'm not a professional in that whatsoever. What I will say is that the final result is very appealing, and there is texture and depth to this, by the way. I can feel it. It's pleasant. It's sort of a little bit scratchy, but kind of in a pleasant way. It feels like it looks, right? You can see the light there sort of reflecting, giving you an idea of depth. Almost looks like a topographical map. Really, really cool. This one is hollow ground or multi-hollow ground, which that's actually a term that I'm unfamiliar with. More interesting to me is the steel is AEBL. I'm sorry, AEB-L. I'm looking at my notes and I'm like, what did I write there? AEB-L, which is a Uniholm steel, but it's not powder formed, to my understanding. This one in particular is heat treated to 62 to 63 HRC, which is, it's up there. That's hard, right? From what I understand, let me give you the basics of what I understand about this steel. There's a lot more to it, but I am not a professional, so you're getting the absolute basic, the most basic information. According to information I can find from the online knife community, the general consensus seems to be that it's a great outdoor steel. It's got good, even carbide formation, but it's not powder formed. It's supposed to have incredibly even structure for a non-powder formed steel. I don't know if it's stainless or not. It's got 13.5% chromium and 3% carbon, so it's kind of like, what do I call this? You know, it's confusing to me, like ZDP 189. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah, the general consensus is it takes an unbelievably fine edge. It's a great outdoor working steel, and despite it not being powder formed, it does have very consistent, very even distribution, you know, in terms of the makeup, right? It's very clean, I guess, across the board. Normally you have to powder form steel to get even distribution of everything. This AEB-L apparently achieves that pretty well without being powder formed. But yeah, that's what I know about it. So pretty cool, right? He's also apparently notorious for each of his knives having a unique fidget factor sound. And I have to admit, once I started playing with it, I realized, yeah, that is the case. I'll be quiet here for a sec so you guys can kind of hear it. It does have some sort of unique sounds associated with it, and I have to admit that I like that. It's very pleasant. Also, in terms of fidget factor, yeah, this thing is definitely set up to be fun to play with. The flipper tab is incredibly unobtrusive. You can see there, I didn't make note of that, but the flipper tab is just basically this little tiny point. But everything's been nicely knocked down, so there's no sharpness or anything. It looks like it'd be a lot sharper than it actually is, but not sharp at all. Very easy to deploy. The detent strength, I would say, is about medium, which is plenty to get it to deploy with the flipper tab. I actually really like to deploy it with this slot right here and using my finger. That's my favorite way to deploy this. I really, really like that. Let's go ahead and take a look at this blade. This is a very interesting blade shape. It reminds me just right here, just this part, the reverse tanto of a 940, but then you have an enormous amount of belly down here. You do have a flat that carries out to something like 40% the length of the blade, and then you have this very interesting swedge, right, that sort of follows the curvature of the belly. Take a look at the blade looking down right here. Isn't that cool? Very, very cool. You're going to have a decent amount of strength out here at the tip, given the shape, but it also comes down to a very, like I said, these are hollow ground, so it does come down, despite this being something around 160 thousandths or so, a very nice thin edge. So I would imagine, and again, I'm not a professional, but I would imagine that given the nature of that steel, right, and what it's designed for, and how he's done the geometry of this, you're going to have an excellent performer, an excellent outdoor performer in terms of a folding knife. Now, again, this is a custom knife, right? So anybody who wanting to purchase a knife of this prestige caliber, this price range, and then go out and use it, yeah, this is going to be a performance-oriented blade. There's also nothing in the cutting path, right? Because it's just a big open hole, no thumb studs or anything like that. You can also choke up on it. And it's definitely a second knuckle choke up, meaning I can get all the way up to my second knuckle here without really feeling like I'm going to run the risk of coming up on the blade. So I like that. I also like that I can lay my thumb down here. It really feels good, right? So there's a lot of different positions you can hold this knife in. Any of them feel really good. Let's talk about this acid etching on the blade. This is awesome. It gives the look of concrete, nice and even. Fantastic contrast with the what was this called? Snow Black Timascus. Sorry, I had to look at my notes. Looks really, really nice. By the way, all edges inside here, all the way around, it's all been nicely knocked down. There's nothing, you can see the chamfering going on there. Just beautiful. Nothing sharp, nothing catching my fingernails where it's not supposed to, except of course the cutting edge, which is very sharp. So that's great. There's also some work done here, I don't know what you call that. It's a sort of this rock, I don't know if I want to call it a rock pattern, but it's not quite jimping, it's just textured back here, and it looks nice. This kind of looks like a tool, it almost looks like it's made of a fossil, right? And then it was dug up out of the ground, and you know, it almost looks like this sort of primitive tool that is also an incredibly modern tool. It's like those two things mixed together. That's an interesting look. That along with the sort of S shape that the knife is achieving in aesthetics here, it's very, very interesting, very different. Let's go down here and take a look at these scales. The scales, I mean, we're going to get to the striking nature of the aesthetics here, but there's grittiness around the outside, but that's due to the nature. That was on purpose. Obviously, he's trying to achieve this texture on top of this black snow Timascus with the deep acid etching, so you can feel it all the way around, but at the same time, it's not sharpness due to like laziness of the final product. It's all on purpose. So in terms of like when you're holding it, yeah, it's very comfortable, right? Where there is grippiness is just due to the different, you being able to feel the highs and lows of this area right here. So it's not bothersome in the hand at all. In terms of visuals, it is absolutely stunning. We kind of already went over that, but I just feel like I want to keep emphasizing it. Even the hardware sort of has that that sort of acid etched finish on there. You can see there the pivot, polished pivot there. I'm going to guess that that's titanium. I did not confirm that was spirited. I'm not going to touch this with my tools, but I can tell you guys, do what I always do, get out my handy dandy Ouija bit selector and Ouija magnetic driver, that the pivot and the body screws are likely both T8. I will hold the heads up next to the hardware so you can see that that is likely the case. And yeah, that looks to be the case there. Possibly a little bit bigger on this guy, possibly up to a T10. In any case, if you do need to take this thing apart, it doesn't look like it's got an enormous amount of, pieces or hardware, and it looks like it's made to actually get into, so that's great. You've got the screw there for the stop pin, which is nice and large. There is some nice shouldering there. Always appreciate that. So that's great. And then you've got one other body screw down here and a single standoff. So that's awesome. Should be super easy to take apart. If I didn't mention, this is running on bearings, but super minimal hardware. That's fantastic. If you're actually going to take this thing apart, or you're actually going to go out and use it, need to clean it every now and then, that's really, really nice. Pocket clip is also nice. It's very simple, but it goes perfectly along with the curvature of the knife. Has the exact same finish. There's two screws sitting in there. It's also obviously a titanium clip. I like the little mark on there. I also like that there's nothing on the blade or anywhere. I mean, the only mark is really on the pocket clip, and that's really, really nice. I like that a lot. You can see there the relief cut has some just extra lines in there, just something to make it look a little bit nicer. So I appreciate that. There is no steel lock bar insert. Of course, I've said this many times, you don't need a steel lock bar insert. Many would argue that carbonized titanium on steel is actually more trustworthy and less slippery than a steel lock bar insert on steel tang contact. So no issues there. You can see there that it is locking up at something like 30% or so, and the blade centering is absolutely perfect. This is very, very polished, very well thought out, very made to fit the human hand. This is nice, and I always appreciate, you know, a custom knife maker does not necessarily have to create a perfectly functional tool, right? There are plenty of custom knife makers out there that are really just, they're taking premium materials and they're polishing everything and making this, you know, they're putting their blood, sweat, and tears into it, but the final product isn't necessarily geared towards utility. In this case, this is a perfectly functional knife. I mean, you can see, you know, the idea of utility being the foundation in a lot of his designs, and I really, really appreciate that. Mr. Gavko is somebody who I've been aware of for much longer than some of the other makers that I had, you know, have had knives that have come across my table, and I've always looked at his designs and appreciated the obvious, like, that is meant to go in someone's hand, that's meant to be manipulated with ease, it's also meant to cut, which sounds something like well, of course, like knives are meant to cut, but you'd be surprised. A lot of makers they make a blade and it's sharp, but is it really meant to like cut efficiently? In this case, yes, absolutely. This is cool. It's definitely one of the most unique knives that has ever come across my table. For those of you who are wondering, can I get a hold of it? So the 3.0s are rare. They're very sought after, especially the version apparently with this Black Snow Timascus. So we've got a kind of a double whammy here. That's why, you know, I'm always very appreciative of people like Spirited Whiskey who can send me these museum relics so I can show them with you guys or share them with you guys. But for those of you wondering, what do these generally run? So these run anywhere from $750 up to $1,500, obviously, and that's generally speaking, right? It depends on the finishes, you know, the materials that are used. This is an upper end material, so if you're wondering how much this one costs, Spirited was nice enough to let me know that this one ran about $1,475. So this is going to be up on the higher end of things. But like I said, you know, this is a custom knife. These are handmade items. So you're getting the combination of exclusivity, of course, the extreme and tedious work that goes, I don't know if tedious is the right word. Essentially, you know, the amount of time spent making sure that everything is lining up correctly, everything is functioning correctly, that it fits in the hand correctly, and that the materials used, however exotic in their base form, are finished in a way that you know, yields a very spectacular final aesthetic. Boy, that was all. It sounded like forced poeticism. Is that a word? I don't know. Now I'm just trying to sound like I'm cool because I'm using big words. Shut up, Complex. Anyways, this was awesome. Spirited, thanks so much for letting me take a look. Like I said, guys, give him a follow on Instagram. He's a great guy. I think that's going to be pretty much it for today's video. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on this Metal Complex logo right here and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.